The night was quiet. Too quiet for a man who had just conquered the world. The stadium lights had dimmed hours ago, but the roar of the crowd still echoed somewhere deep inside Cristiano Ronaldo's chest. Not as triumph, not as joy, but as a hollow sound, like applause bouncing off empty walls. He sat alone in the back of his black SUV, the city of Madrid sliding past the tinted windows like a film he had already seen too many times. The driver said nothing. The bodyguard in the front seat stared forward. And Cristiano was somewhere else entirely. He had scored twice tonight. 2 goals, a standing ovation, his name chanted by 60,000 voices until the sound became something physical, something you could almost touch. And yet, here, in the leather silence of his car, he felt nothing. Or worse, he felt something he refused to name. Something that had been growing quietly for months, hiding beneath the trophies and the headlines and the carefully constructed image of a man who needed nothing from anyone. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. It was Junior. "Dad, are you coming home tonight? I waited for you." Cristiano read the message 3 times. Then he put the phone face down on the seat beside him and looked out the window again. A group of teenagers were kicking a ball under a street lamp, their laughter cutting through the cold night air. One of them was wearing his jersey, number 7. They had no idea the man they worshipped was watching them from 30 meters away, invisible behind dark glass, wondering when exactly he had stopped feeling like himself. But what no one knew, what no headline would ever capture, was that tonight was different. Tonight, something was about to break. It had started 3 weeks earlier, though Cristiano wouldn't have been able to tell you that at the time. It started with a conversation he overheard in a corridor he wasn't supposed to be in. He had stayed late at the training facility, as he always did. The lights in the main complex were already off, the other players long gone to their dinners and their families and their ordinary, blessedly ordinary evenings. Cristiano was finishing his 3rd set of sprints when he heard voices echoing from the medical wing. He wasn't eavesdropping. He simply stopped and listened. 2 members of the coaching staff. Words drifting through the half-open door like smoke. "The numbers don't lie. Recovery time is increasing. The body is changing. At 38, you have to ask how long." The board is already talking. He didn't hear the rest. He didn't need to. He had heard enough. Not the words themselves, but the tone behind them. The tone of people discussing a problem they haven't decided how to solve yet. And Cristiano Ronaldo understood, with cold and sudden clarity, that the problem they were discussing was him. He walked back to his car in silence. He drove home alone. He didn't sleep. And for the first time in 20 years, Cristiano Ronaldo was afraid. Not afraid of failing. He had failed before, missed penalties, lost finals, been knocked down in ways that would have ended lesser men. He knew how to get up from failure. He had built his entire identity on getting up. This was different. This was the fear he had never admitted to anyone, not to his mother, not to his closest friends, not even to himself in the dark of 3 in the morning when the rest of the world was asleep and the only sound was his own breathing. This was the fear that one day, without warning, without ceremony, the world would simply move on, that the chants would grow quieter, that the jerseys on strangers' backs would carry a different name, that Cristiano Ronaldo would become a reference point, a footnote, a name people used to describe someone else's greatness. He was the best. Once. He had heard that sentence used about others. He had never, not once, not for a single second, allowed himself to imagine it being used about him. But now it floated in the darkness of his bedroom at 2 in the morning, and he could not make it disappear. Ama asıl sak edisay olense. The thing that truly shook him was not the fear itself. It was what he found when he finally, reluctantly, looked directly at it. He found Junior's face. Cristiano Junior was 14 years old, and he played football the way his father once had, with a kind of furious, joyful hunger that didn't yet know it was supposed to be controlled. Cristiano had watched his son at practice one afternoon, standing at the edge of the field with sunglasses and a low cap, unrecognized, just another parent in the shade. And he had watched Junior miss a shot, curse under his breath exactly the way Cristiano did, and then immediately line up to take the shot again. He recognized himself so completely that it almost hurt. But then something else happened. A coach called Junior over. They talked quietly for a moment, and Junior nodded and jogged back to the group, and his shoulders were lighter, somehow. He was laughing within 30 seconds. Cristiano had stood very still. When was the last time he had laughed like that at training? He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember, and that terrified him more than anything the coaching staff had said in that corridor. The weeks that followed were a performance within a performance. On the pitch, he was immaculate. The goals kept coming, the records kept falling, the machine kept running at a level that defied everything the calendar insisted was true about a man his age. Off the pitch, he smiled at cameras, gave the right answers in interviews, posted the right moments on social media. The brand continued. The icon continued. But something was pulling at him from underneath. It was Junior's message, still unread on his phone the morning after a Champions League match that he had decided, alone, was perhaps the most important of his career. Not because of what was at stake for the club, but because of what he had decided to prove to the voices in the corridor, to the board, to every commentator who had started measuring his career in past tense. He had played with a fury so concentrated it frightened even him. 2 goals. A win. Silence from the critics. Temporary. And a 14-year-old boy had waited up for him. "Dad, are you coming home tonight? I waited for you." He picked up his phone in the car. He read the message again. He typed, "On my way." Then he stopped, deleted it, stared at the blinking cursor. Because what happened next was not what anyone expected from Cristiano Ronaldo. He told the driver to stop. Not at the house. Not at a restaurant. Not at any destination that made sense given the hour, given the evening, given everything that was expected of him. He told the driver to stop at a small park, 3 blocks from a street he used to walk down when he first came to Madrid, young and foreign and burning with something that didn't yet have a name. He got out of the car. He told his bodyguard to wait. And he walked. The park was empty. A few lamps cast orange pools on the wet path. His breath was visible in the cold. He sat on a bench that was damp from earlier rain and did not care about his coat. He sat there like a man who has something to figure out and has finally stopped pretending he doesn't. He thought about his mother, Dolores, who had worked every hour God made to keep 4 children fed in a house in Madeira that had too little of everything except love and noise. He thought about the boy he had been, small for his age, overlooked, told more than once that he was too slight, too emotional, too much of something that didn't fit the shape the coaches were looking for. He thought about the first time he left the island, 14 years old, a bag that was mostly empty, a heart that was mostly fear. He thought about what he had told himself that day, on the ferry, watching Madeira disappear behind him. I will not be forgotten. It had been his fuel, his compass, his engine. It had driven him through the darkness of every bad game, every unfair criticism, every sleepless night before a final that meant everything. It had made him extraordinary. It had also, he realized now, sitting on a cold bench in a Madrid park at midnight, made him alone in ways he had never fully reckoned with. Ist tam biunoctata herse digisti, right here, on this bench, in this silence, something shifted. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Not Junior this time. Not his agent. Not anyone from the club. It was a number he hadn't called in almost a year. A number that belonged to a man he had once trusted more than almost anyone, and then had pulled away from. The way Cristiano always pulled away from people who saw him too clearly. His childhood friend from Madeira, Ricardo. The only person alive who knew him before any of this. Before the money, before the Ballon d'Or, before the number 7 on 50 million backs. He stared at the phone. It rang 4 times. 5. He answered. I saw the match, Ricardo said, without greeting. You played like you were trying to prove something. Cristiano said nothing for a long moment. The park was very still. I always play like that, he said finally. No, Ricardo said. You played to win. Tonight you played like you were fighting someone. Who were you fighting? Der Bur de Kika, Bu de te Kasurma. Because Cristiano Ronaldo, the man who had answered 1,000 journalists' questions with the precision of a lawyer, said nothing. For 11 seconds, he said absolutely nothing. And in those 11 seconds, Ricardo understood everything. They talked for 40 minutes. Cristiano sat on the bench and talked to the only person who had never needed him to be anything in particular. They talked about Madeira. They talked about their old coach who had died 2 years ago and whom Cristiano had not had time to mourn properly, or had not allowed himself to. They talked about Junior, who Ricardo had met once at a family event and declared, "Exactly like you, but better because he still thinks it's fun." Cristiano laughed at that. A real laugh, the kind that surprised him, that arrived before he could decide whether to allow it. "You should tell him that," Ricardo said. "Not the footballer things. The real things. What it cost. What you almost lost. What you wish you had done differently." "He's 14, Cristiano said. "You were 14 when you left Madeira alone. You would have wanted someone to tell you." Cristiano was quiet again. But this was a different kind of quiet. Because what he did next, no publicist approved it, no sponsor endorsed it, no camera captured it. He went home. He walked through the door at 1:15 in the morning and Junior was asleep on the couch, still in his training kit, the television on mute, a controller still in his hand. He had waited. He went home. He walked through the door at 1:15 in the morning and Junior was asleep on the couch, still in his training kit, the television on mute, a controller still in his hand. He had waited. Cristiano stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at his son. This boy who had his eyes, his stubbornness, his hunger. This boy who would inherit, whether he wanted it or not, the weight of a name that meant too much to too many people. He sat down on the edge of the couch. He didn't wake him. He just sat there in the blue light of the muted screen, and he thought, this is real. This is what's real. The trophies were real. The records were real. But they were in cases and databases and highlight reels. This sleeping boy with the training mud still on his shin, this was the thing that would matter when all the other things had stopped mattering. He pulled a blanket over Junior's shoulders. And then he did something he had not done in longer than he could remember. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't check the post-match statistics, didn't read the reactions to tonight's goals. He turned the television off. He sat in the dark and quiet of his own house, breathing, present, here. Iname Akaxaname, this was the moment Cristiano Ronaldo decided something that no one would know about for a long time. The next morning he was first at training as always. He pushed himself as he always did. Harder, in fact, because the fear was still there, and the fear was still fuel, and he had not yet figured out how to run on anything else. But something was different in the afternoon. When Junior called after school, Cristiano answered on the first ring. "Dad. You came home last night." "I did." He went home. He walked through the door at 1:15 in the morning and Junior was asleep on the couch, still in his training kit, the television on mute, a controller still in his hand. He had waited. Cristiano stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at his son. This boy who had his eyes, his stubbornness, his hunger. This boy who would inherit, whether he wanted it or not, the weight of a name that meant too much to too many people. He sat down on the edge of the couch. He didn't wake him. He just sat there in the blue light of the muted screen, and he thought, this is real. This is what's real. The trophies were real. The records were real. But they were in cases and databases and highlight reels. This sleeping boy with the training mud still on his shin, this was the thing that would matter when all the other things had stopped mattering. He pulled a blanket over Junior's shoulders. And then he did something he had not done in longer than he could remember. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't check the post-match statistics, didn't read the reactions to tonight's goals. He turned the television off. He sat in the dark and quiet of his own house, breathing, present, here. Iname Akaxaname, this was the moment Cristiano Ronaldo decided something that no one would know about for a long time. The next morning he was first at training as always. He pushed himself as he always did. Harder, in fact, because the fear was still there, and the fear was still fuel, and he had not yet figured out how to run on anything else. But something was different in the afternoon. When Junior called after school, Cristiano answered on the first ring. "Dad. You came home last night." "I did." "I felt it. I woke up a little bit, but I didn't say anything."
Cristiano smiled.
"Why not?" "Because you looked like you needed to just sit there." 14 years old. He already understood things that had taken Cristiano decades to begin to approach. I'm coming to your practice Thursday, Cristiano said. You always say that. I'm coming Thursday, Cristiano said again. Not a promise. A decision. Junior was quiet for a second. Okay, he said. And the word landed differently from the way it usually did. Softer, more careful, like something he was choosing to believe in. He did go Thursday. He stood at the edge of the field in sunglasses, and he watched, and when Junior scored on a curling left-footed shot that nobody taught him, pure instinct, pure joy, Cristiano did not think about technique or positioning or what a coach would say. He thought, that's mine. That part of him is mine. Not the trophies. Not the brand. This moment on a Thursday afternoon, a boy who plays the way he used to play before he learned to play correctly. Ama asıl sak edisayolan say, was the conversation they had in the car on the way home. Junior, uncharacteristically quiet, finally said, Are you scared? About getting old? Cristiano looked at the road. Yes, he said. Junior nodded slowly, the way teenagers do when they receive an honest answer they didn't fully expect. What does it feel like? Like the thing you've been running toward your whole life might also be the thing you've been running away from. Junior stared out the window. That's really confusing. Yes, Cristiano said. It is. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, the not knowing felt something like relief.